Well, hey everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 19 of Frieren, Beyond Journey's End. And I have quite a few comments to talk about, so we're not going to waste any more time because I have a lot of comments, mainly from episode 16 over on YouTube that I want to talk about before we dive any further. But Darwin Award winner talked about how in episode 16, the first time that Vol conversation, Frieren said, it was the first time when Vol was having the conversation with Frieren that Frieren said something was important to her. Before, it's just been like, well, maybe, and I don't know, I guess. But this was the first time in episode 16 where Frieren was like, yeah, these people are important to me. Specifically, Himmel's important to me, Fern is important to me, etc., etc. And that's a huge step for Frieren to get to that point. So I thought that was really good to point out. Aerith 1202 talked about looking back after episode 16 and episode 18. I would add there, with Kraft being shunned by Ubel. It is kind of sad that Stark did not remember Kraft. If Kraft was before Flom's time, which I agree, my theory is that Kraft is older than Flom before that period and everything, then it was a time, Aerith points out, where mages were not as frequent. I don't know exactly how it works. I mean, the mages, we know that Flom made magic more mainstream to humans, but then Frieren was using magic kind of like a mage against, the demon that was after her family, and she was an elf, so I'm not sure how that works either. We're just running off of what the show has given us so far and our assumptions with it. Right, but it could be that Kraft was a warrior and the human was a priest. And several people kind of echoed that. J.M. Hases talked about Kraft being a warrior and maybe became a bit more spiritual after the death of his human priest friend. Right, which ended up him becoming a monk. I think the classification of monk is interesting because it's kind of like a mix between a priest and a warrior, which is fascinating to me, right? But Aerith 1202 is getting to the point of, before Flom's time, mages were not nearly as prevalent, so it would be like a warrior and a priest going together throughout the lands instead of a mage and a priest, which I think is rather interesting. But as Frieren's established by getting Stark into the party, warriors are kind of necessary, so it seems like the warrior priest dynamic duo are the main ones that have always been there. They've always been the constant, and the mages have just kind of come in as time has gone on and magic's become more accessible, which is interesting to me. And then Druid C. Dwarf points out that Frieren has technically, through their experience with Cyan, through their experience with Kraft, has gained some spirituality. So maybe they are kind of like Kraft and taking that on into their identity. Not full blown, Frieren's still kind of a little bit in denial, but I think that that's pretty interesting. And Mr. Cinos 275 said something very similar. And then just Jadenelle points out that I was like, what is Stark going to do? Because my theory when we started out when we get to heaven, was that Stark was going to see Ison and he was going to die. And it's going to be like, oh no, ultimate tragedy. But the further we get into this series, the more I think, no, Ison's going to be alive for them to get back and tell the stories to. So I'm like, well, who is Stark going to see in heaven? And just Jadenelle points out that Stark could see his dad or his brother, which would be interesting. Now, my personal headcanon right now, I think the dad is alive. I think the brother's dead. I think the brother did die in that demon attack, but I think the father's alive because I think that Stark, one of two things I think is going to happen. Either Stark's dad is alive and the conversation Stark had with his relative, who is the father, and the insight he got on that perspective of his dad is going to come into play when he actually meets his father, and then he's going to have a new perspective, a new outlook, and he's going to be able to talk to his dad about his past and moving forward. Or it's going to be like just Jadenelle said, where he does see his dad and Stoltz in heaven, and he's able to talk to them there. I think it's going to be one of those two, but I like that idea that you could see family there, and so he's not left out like he is in this arc. In this arc, Stark is completely left out. He has nothing to do. He's just sitting at the library. He's napping. You know what, though? Stark's had a rough time. In this anime, Stark has had to do a lot of things that have been pushing him to his mental and physical capacities. Maybe it's good that Stark just gets to kind of meditate, work out. He gets to go to the gym and be on vacation while Frieren and Fern are doing this first class mage exam. Maybe this is his just desserts. But I thought those comments were really good. I'm really excited to dive into this episode. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm super excited to see what happens, and I hope you all are too. But we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive right in and see what all we get. So we are going to start episode 19 of Frieren, Beyond Journey's End. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. This episode went by insanely fast. How? I think it's because we had that recap, which we maybe had a recap at the very beginning of the series, but I mean, it ended on a pretty perfect note, so I'm not mad at it at all. And I thought about bringing Whiteboard Coon out, but I think the only reason I would bring Whiteboard Coon out is to write down names. And so we'll probably have Whiteboard Coon out next week to keep track of who's fighting who and what names are going where. But we got characters introduced. We learn a bit about them. We're going to go over them in this episode. And like I said, next week we might bring Whiteboard Coon out to kind of keep track of what's going on. But it should have been obvious when we had Werble and Dinkin's parties introduced. It should have been obvious that they were going to fight Fern's party and Frieren's party, but I didn't even think about it that way. I didn't think about it as the mages having to fight each other because I had the assumption that, oh, there's enough stills for everybody to go around. Everybody's going to be worried about their own. But yeah, it comes into play that if you can't catch one yourself, we'll just steal one that's already been caught. And now we have Frieren and Fern's parties who have caught the stills. And now it's a matter of, can they hold on to the birds until the end of the challenge, right? Can they manage to do that? Because the well-laid plans came to fruition, but now it's like a matter of, if they don't keep a hold of the birds, they won't have enough time, I don't think, to catch another one. So I don't know. Like I said, I really want both Frieren and Fern to pass the test, but I don't know if that's going to be a thing or not. I don't know if that's going to be a thing. We're just going to have to wait and see on that. But I like Frieren going through this episode and kind of just thinking about how parties are different. I love seeing Ison again. I love seeing that he's still, like, when he shakes, it reminds us back when Stark said that Ison told him he did the same. And I like Himmel saying, well, I'm scared too. I like Frieren is, at the fire going, why are we talking about this? As they're about to go fight a dragon. It was really, really cute. And it makes me realize that, like, Frieren's party back then with Himmel and Ison and Hyder were like the most chill, adorable party ever. It's crazy to think they defeated the Demon King when they're all just sitting around being like, man, I'm really scared to fight a dragon. You scared to fight a dragon? Me too, bro. But we're going to make it through. It's going to be all right. And I'm like, you all defeated the Demon King. What? So I feel like eventually we're going to go back to that and get some more insight because we've never seen them fight the Demon King. We don't exactly know what went down and how it went down. Eventually we're going to get back to that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm so fascinated by seeing all of these flashbacks of Frieren's old party. And she comes to the realization that every party has a different dynamic, which is absolutely illustrated in this episode because every party of mages trying to find these birds all function under a very different dynamic. And we'll talk about it here in a second. But I like Himmel saying that he wanted to copy other adventures and be inspiring. But he's like, how can I do that when we all handle these things in a different way, shape, and form? So that's not necessary. And I love Frieren, like, looking down at the two girls and being like, yeah, it does differ from party to party. It really is different. She's like, these two are real lovey-dovey. I definitely ship Laine and Kene together. I like them a lot. I think they're a good pair. I ship them. They're super cute together. And now that they don't fight each other for 5 seconds, it's even better. So Fern's group catches the bird. Like, Frieren goes off to test her magic, and Fern's group has already caught the bird. Interesting. So Fern got it. Now Fern is really, really good at hiding her mana. But the birds can detect even the slightest traces. So I'm very curious how Fern's group caught it. I'm sure she had something to do with it. I wonder what the guy with the glasses, is his name Land? What Land does? what Land's ability is. I really feel bad now because last week, and I'm sure episode 18 hasn't come out on Patreon yet, so I'm sure as you all are watching this, hindsight's 2020. I wonder what people are going to say when I was like, man, Land looks like he's just going to sit there and do nothing, because that is not how he seems in this episode. In this episode, he is quite a go-getter, and he does the Madorama off of Kuroko's basketball where he pushes the glasses up on his face. He seems like he is an intelligent combat strategist. And Ubel is like, Ubel seems to have the philosophy of, if you're strong, I'll play along. Like that's her strategy. If you're strong, I'll play along. And I think she may, detect that Fern and Land are strong. And she's like, sure, I'll go with y'all if that's what we got to do. But they're an interesting group. I honestly thought that they would not get along. I thought this group was not going to get along at all. I thought that Ubel was going to be really rebellious. I thought Land was going to be just like a stick in the mud, more so than Fern, and Fern was going to be kind of antisocial. But no, they get along surprisingly well. Land kind of seems a little bit like a bitch. Land's just kind of like, he seems a little bit uppity, but in like, I like myself a diva that's a little uppity, so I think I'll like Land. He seems interesting. And Ubel, she is the wild card in all of this, because Ubel, she is so, like, there's just an uncertainty about her. Like, I don't know what she's gonna do. One thing I like about her character, though, is that she's not annoying. Like, Ubel, I've seen characters like her where she's like, I'm the rebellious one. I'm the one that doesn't follow rules. I'm chaos. And they're annoying. And she is not that. She's actually interesting. And I like Ubel, I like Land, and I like Fern. I like their whole team. I'm surprised by how cohesive they are. I'm a little worried about them facing this other group, but we'll get to that. They seem like the strategizing group that are able to strategize and find a way to win. So hoping that works out for them. Meanwhile, Frieren is back to her wayward school for young mages, where we go over the Stille being tough as a dragon, goes the speed of sound, and they're very sensitive to mana. And they come up with this idea, realizing they can't get very close. And they're like, we need to find a way to get the Stille to where it has to come near us. Because if we just chase it, it's not going to work. We're going to just be chasing and running around circles. It's going to be sunset tomorrow, and we're still not going to have it. So they're like, we need to find a way to force the bird to come to us. And that's when they get the idea to cut off all the water sources to where the bird has to come to them. But Dinkin kind of figures them out. We'll talk about Dinkin. I love Dinkin. He's so freaking cool. So yeah, I like in this episode how the fighting is to a minimum. And again, Frieren, she talks about using a folk spell developed to capture any monster that resembled a bird. That seems like such a redneck spell. Like a redneck folk spell. I don't know, it catches things looks like birds. And somebody would be like, well, but what specific bird does it catch? And the folk people are like, I don't know, something looks like a bird. I love the concept that Frieren just went around and she's like, oh, a spell that'll capture a monster that looks like a bird. I'll use that. It's a good thing Frieren's a hoarder and that all these spells kind of come in handy. She just whips into her pocket and finds one. But yeah, I like how it was previewed in the last episode, and then we see it brought to light here and used in a different context. And so she's like, the range is 50 centimeters. 50 centimeters is not that many. If we do centimeters to inches, if we had 50 centimeters, that's only like 1.5 feet. That's not much. And a meter is 3 feet. So that's not a lot of wiggle room for that spell to work. 1.5 feet. Not a lot. A very powerful spell, but one that does not have a lot of range. And they're like, the closest they could get were 20 meters away, which is not 1.5 feet at all. So Frieren's like, look, I figured it out. I'm gonna restrict my mana, get the bird to land on me. Frieren is so perfect for that plan because of her meditation and how serious she is about Frieren is not impatient. Frieren is like the polar opposite of impatient. So she's the perfect person to just sit there and let it happen and meditate and let the bird come to her. Like, that was perfect. Frieren was absolutely perfect for that. And I love what I love is that they kind of they go about trying to catch this bird, and they go about the plan in a way that you kind of question how they're going to do it, because Kene says that she can control water, and she's like, well, I can control water, but it usually needs to be like in small amounts of water, because like everything in a liquid spreads out, right? So she would need a lot of mana to spread out over a giant body of water. And she's like, I can't do that. So she's like, if I had something small and easily scattered like rain, I could put a lot of mana in that and control it. But the problem is, then the bird would detect all that and run away. And that's when Frieren gets the idea of, okay, we'll narrow down the water sources the bird has access to only the ones that we can access. It's so good. And what I like about it is that they do the stereotypical like, oh, we got a plan then, and you don't find out the plan until later on. But one, they don't make you wait an entire episode. You find it out pretty quickly after that. And two, it's not necessarily dumbed down, but it's also not so over your head. Frieren like hits this really good balance of being smart, but not too clever to where you can't understand it and figure it out on your own. I love it. I love it. I love how it's done. Nice. So, as things are going on, they're like, if we freeze all this water, we're going to piss everybody off. And they're probably going to fight us. And it's like, yep. And that's probably going to be the case. Now, Land had the idea of hiding in the cave until the test was over. Land was the smart one. Land's like, if we just hide in here till the test's over, we're going to be fine. Land was pretty smart. Although Ubel says that that's no fun, but I do agree that hiding in the cave does have a disadvantage. Like if you're cornered in the cave, because they're a team of 3, you could get cornered in the cave. Then you're in trouble. And I think that some of these mages have the ability to detect mana like Dinkin. So hiding in the cave until sunset the next day would probably not have worked out. So even though Land has the smart idea of avoiding conflict, I think Ubel might have been on the right side being like, well, that's no fun and that's not going to work. We're mages. We should fight openly. I think she knew the fight was going to come to them. And he's like, well, mages should also avoid unnecessary fighting. And she's like, well, I need water, so we got to go find some. I like that all she has to do is hold up the canteen and it be empty. And Land's like, shit, she's going to be annoying if we don't go find water. He's like, we should go get some water first, I guess. There was a lake in the middle of the area. So then we find out from Fern and Ubel and all them in their group that, yeah, there's a lake in the middle of this test area because they dammed up all the riverbeds to where there has to be only one major source of water. And this is like the freaking Hunger Games. Like, they are literally drawing the mages out in the open to make them have to confront one another. And yeah, it's a dog-eat-dog world. I'm honestly, when they said that some mages don't pass this test, I was like, okay, that's fine. But when you see the mages not living through the test, it's like, oh. But I kind of agree with Dinkin. I get what they're saying. They're like, we want you to be first-class mages. And there's an interesting dialogue going on there, and we'll talk more about it when we get to Dinkin's monologue to his group about that philosophy. But I do think that, like, yeah, you can't get mad at the council for letting the people die, because one, you should know at this point, they've been doing this first-class mage exam for how long now? You should kind of know going in that there's a chance you could die. And two, if you can't handle the mages that are in this sphere, then there ain't no way you're going to be able to handle the demons and the stuff outside of it. So, I don't know. I get why they have it done this way, but it's very devious. So they're like, well, we caught a Still, but it's not going to be that easy. They're luring everybody together so that there's a good chance you're going to run into somebody. It's in the middle of the valley. The test takers are living creatures. We could gather around and take the water, but the Still's going to have to drink at some point. And I like that Land's like, never mind, let's not go get water. And Ubel's like, but I'm parched. I need some water. And then Werble was right behind the tree. They're like, well, we can find a pond. And they're like, well, is that sanitary? I'm like, how is the lake any less sanitary than a pond? But then they say they can boil it, right? So then Werble and them show up. Now, Werble, I love the shot of Werble facing Ubel. They are both divas, and I kind of love them. He has this like little knife, like it looks like a little axe and a knife mixed together, and then she has her trident. I love it. They both look like they're in a pop idol group. Both of them do. I like it a lot. They both Ubel and Werble are both divas, it seems, and they both think that they're very strong. Then we have Sharf of the 8th Party, and he's a 3rd class mage. I like Sharf. He has a little gemstone hanging. He has the Peaky Blinders haircut. I feel like Sharf and Land, are they like a crack ship because Land has the blonde hair and the glasses and Sharf has the Peaky Blinders haircut and the dark hair? I don't know. Can I ship mage on mage? Can I do it? And then there's Air. Now, Air is interesting because Fern says she's the strongest of the group. And Air tries to pass it off. I feel like the 8th Party, which is Werble and Air and Sharf, they are all very offensive. They're very much like, let's overpower the opponent. Whereas Fern and Ubel and Land seem more like strategists. I don't know. We'll talk about it. But I feel like the 8th Party is very much majorly offensive. Dinkin's party is already a terrifying threat. Dinkin can like sense mana like that, like even tiny traces of it that are minute. He seems like he's been around the block. He can sense mana. That's terrifying. And the girl in their party is insanely fast. I don't like her being the Flash. I don't like that. And then we don't even know what the guy can do. The guy that looks like he would work for an accounting firm. But yeah, so interesting that we have them all together. And then yeah, Werble, I was shooting to kill. And Ubel's like, well, lucky you, I want to kill my opponents, so yay. Now, he notes that Fern is quick enough to react to his attacks. And I'm like, Fern is like Frieren. She doesn't like showing off. She just knows the hardcore basics. But all you need to know are the hardcore basics. Whenever Air was giving her the lecture about, it was like fighting her grandma and all she knew were old magic, offensive and defensive magic, I felt like it was a scene from Haikyuu, the volleyball anime, where somebody like on one team learns this brand new trick, this new technique, and they're like, it's the newest technique for playing volleyball, whatever. And then the main character from Crossnose team's like, but all you need to know are the basics. If you master the basics, you're often in a better boat than the people that just rely on like gimmicky techniques. That's what it seems like to me, that Fern's like, well, I've mastered the basics, and that's a lot stronger than these gimmick techniques. And so Werble's like, let's do all action, no talking. And at that point, that's when they hear Frieren and their group freezing the lake to catch the bird and to do all that. It's so genius. I love this part here where Dinkin is like, they're all idiots. Not only is the lake freezing going to scare away all of the birds, but all they're doing is pouring in more magic to try to melt the ice, and it's scaring away all the birds permanently. He's like, what an idiot. I love Dinkin. Dinkin is so badass and cool, and he's like he's like basically a male version of Frieren almost. A human male version of Frieren. That's Dinkin, and I like him a lot so far, right? He's got his little monocle and his big mustache and beard. So Dinkin's 2nd class mage in the 13th party. Lucky number 13. Then we have Richter. Richter is interesting. I wonder if it's like a Richter scale. He's a 2nd class mage. Richter looks super stoic and like he looks, I don't know, he doesn't look like worrisome, but he looks super stoic. Like he would work at a law firm, right? And then Richter, and then Laufen. Laufen is freaking fast and crazy. I love Dinkin's party. They all look really, really cool. They're neat. And he's like, we should go after Frieren's party because they probably have a plan to catch the bird. I like that Fern is like, what the hell is Frieren doing? Fern's like, I've left my grandma alone. What is she up to now? What's her plan? Oh, Fern being concerned for Frieren. Meanwhile, Land says that they need to scatter. They need to split up gang so that they're not just clustered in a group together. And then Dinkin talks about how they should go and try to find the 2nd party. They had a well-laid plan. We will, until we unravel it, we won't get anywhere. Dinkin kind of is like, I'm more scared of Dinkin as an adversary than I am of Werble. Because Werble is like, Werble, he's like, oh, I'm part of this northern expedition group. I have to be strong to survive. I'm going to use all these powerful offensive attacks. But I feel like if you can outsmart Werble, if you can out strategize him, and if you can outpace him and out persevere him, you'll beat him. I feel like Werble is a lot more conquerable, which is why Fern's group's facing him. But I think Dinkin is like the type of villain that the type of antagonist, not necessarily villain, but he's the type of antagonist you don't want. Because not only is he probably strong, but he's smart, and he's experienced, and he's patient, and he's not reckless. And that is dangerous. So I feel 10 times more afraid of Dinkin than I do Werble at this point. Not that we shouldn't be afraid of Werble, because Werble can be probably unpredictable, but Dinkin worries me because I'm afraid that he has the skills to back himself up. Because then he has knowledge too. Because like when they pass the corpses and she's like, let's take them down. He's like, no, those monsters put magic on the corpses. If we touch him, it's like ringing a bell. Like you grab the lure, and it's like a fishing lure, and they're going to come down and get you. So Dinkin has experience. He knows a thing or two, and he knows how they lure in their prey and what to avoid, which the other two seem to not know that. So yeah, I'm terrified of Dinkin. I'm a bit worried about him, if I'm being honest. So yeah, he's like, the people administer the test in this area inspired by monsters like these. And then I like that Richter's like, so Richter and Dinkin have taken the exam before. Are we under that impression? Because Richter and Dinkin both ask her, being like, Luffen, this is your first time taking the test. So it seems like they've been here before and taken it before and survived. They just didn't pass. So they're like, the test examiners, they don't care. Anyone who would die here is not qualified to be a mage. And then meanwhile, we see the first class mages. They're just out there. It's like the tent from Great British Bake Off. They're just drinking tea, being like, you guys want to have some crumpets and scones while they're dying out there? Ha 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 ha. It's a little bit elitist. He's like, there's a reputation and an image to uphold with the first class mages. Mm-hmm. And they only accept the cream of the crop, right? There are those who still dream of the powerful and noble mages who fought the Demon King's forces. So they're trying to keep up with the mages that fought the Demon King in the past. The funny thing is, the mage that defeated the Demon King, with the help of Himmelheiter and Eisen, is there. At some point, I was expecting, which of course Frieren won't do it. She's not going to name drop because that's not who she is. I'm really surprised that no one has caught on or realized that Frieren is of the party that killed the Demon King. Because, I mean, there were statues erected everywhere of them. So has nobody seen her and noticed that she's the elf that defeated the Demon King? And if so, you would think that the committee would be like, oh, you're the mage that defeated the Demon King. Oh my God, why were you not a first class mage? How'd you manage that? I keep thinking it's going to come back and be a thing, but it might not be. I'm not going to talk too much about the OP because there's a lot of images there that I'm like, I want to see what the show is going to do with them, particularly with the imp. It seems like the imp knows Frieren, that they've met before, which we speculated last episode, but I'm like, there was like little shots that seemed a little spoilery as to the imp's past. So like, are they a king? What's happening? We're going to wait on that. We're going to file that away. We're going to put a pin in it, pin it over here, and we're going to come back to it at the end of the season. We're going to come back to that. So yeah, because I don't want to get too far ahead of myself with the OP. But yeah, so I like Dinkin saying, damn, they're outdated ideas. And Richter's like, I wouldn't have pegged you to be somebody that would be, be like, up for the millennials. I thought you'd be on their side. And Dinkin says the quality of the mage is irrelevant. He says first-class mages need only to be symbols of power. So that's interesting to me. Like Dinkin's like, it doesn't really matter if the first class mages hold up to the reputation. They just have to look powerful and be a symbol of it. It's kind of like, I don't know if he's doing quantity over quality. It sounds like he wants to do quantity over quality. He's like, it doesn't matter if the mage is strong enough to defeat the demons. It should be a matter of we have a strength in numbers, and then the demons will be. Because here's the thing, and I kind of get where Dinkin's coming from a little bit, because we've established the demons, they're not human. They are a species all their own. They imitate humans, but they don't quite think the same way that humans do, and they don't react under the same power structure. So whereas, the quality and reputation of the mages and upholding the tradition of the mages and making sure they're all the finest pedigree, Dinkin's like, demons don't care about that shit. Demons just want to know, can we beat the mages? And he's like, we need to promote an image that we are symbols of power, that there are enough of us the demons should be worried. And it's kind of like Dinkin is saying, we need to be the predator and the demons need to be the prey. And that strength in numbers, regardless of if the mages are qualified or not, will eventually scare and crack the armor of the demons and get them to go away, or at least to shrink down or be manageable. So yeah, I get where Dinkin is coming from. I get what he's saying there about them just needing to be a symbol. And he adds to that saying, no matter how powerful you are, unless you can control people's hearts, you're as good as powerless. So, and that's kind of reflected in this test, is that can you not only be strong enough to survive against other mages, but can you work together? Can you win people over? Can you encourage them to work with you? Can you form alliances? Can you negotiate? It's like, it's not enough to just be strong. You have to be able to kind of be multifaceted and manipulate on different fronts. It's neat. I really like Dinkin's perspective, and I like where he's coming from with this. It's a different perspective. And he's like, I've seen countless mages far more skilled than myself. I really like how, with his hair pushed back in the monocle, I'm just saying, again, he looks like a relative of Stark. I'm just saying, now that I'm looking at him he looks like, in his old form, he looks like Stark and Ison, like, combined and melted together. But yeah, I like how he was once this big, strong, tall, burly mage, and now he's a lot older, so he's kind of shrank down. He's like, I've seen mages far more skilled than myself, which is interesting. He notices the mage that's like an old crone. He notices the mage that gets carried away, fall from power, and be persecuted. So he's seen mages stronger than him fall from power and be persecuted. So he's like, that didn't make any difference. Great power is feared, and rule by fear doesn't last long. So he's like, we need to keep that symbol of power up and make it consistent, because it's going to go in flux constantly. I love that. I love how he's oddly optimistic, where he's like, well, great power is feared and rule by fear doesn't last long. So I'm like, I really like Dinkin. I like his perspective so much. I like where he's coming at it from this. It's really cool. But yeah, and they're like, besides, magic isn't a noble thing. And I like Richter kind of smiles at that, where he's like, magic is not something that the elite should have hold of. And he's like, someone as weak as you is perfect for the job. I love that Richter says that, and I love that he's like, watch your tongue, boy. I love it. It very much felt like it felt very much like kind of like Stark and Ison, in the sense of, because you're imperfect, because you're weak, that makes you relatable to the people. It also kind of reminds me of Richter reminds me a little bit of the character Marco from Attack on Titan, and Dinkin reminds me of a wise Jean. An older, wise Jean, saying that, and I like that, because Richter kind of is just suggesting that Dinkin is like a man of the people. He's somebody that can reach people's hearts and encourage them, motivate them, and that's what a first-class mage shouldn't just be a symbol of power, but they also need to be a representative and someone that mages and civilians alike can feel inspired and comforted by. And that is Dinkin's ability. So I find that interesting. I really like Dinkin. I think he's cool. I want to see more of him. He's like, I could beat you with my eyes closed. I want to see more of Dinkin as these episodes go on. And then he finds a little pond of water and is like, this is where we're going to make camp and sleep at. He's like, we're just going to wait him out. And he notices all the mana in the watering holes. Now, Richter and Laufin don't seem to sense the mana, but Dinkin can. So he's pretty powerful. He's either a powerful mage or he has a powerful ability to detect mana. So we'll see. Meanwhile, we go back to Frieren and the others who she manages to condense her mana down. And I loved this scene. Again, Frieren is so good about combining really quiet scenes with keeping you enthralled at the same time. And so we have like the monster come up and then the demon that like killed its own kind, killed like 3 other people earlier, didn't notice her. And then finally the Stille lands on her shoulder and she's able to take that opportunity to get the bird. Oh, I love it. It's so good. Oh, I love that moment. It just so wonderful. But the moment she used the magic, that's when Dinkin sensed it. Now, he's like, I found them. They used magic after all. Oh, and I love that she just disappeared. Like just, that was it. Done. Gone. Right in front of them. Laufin being super fast is terrifying. Terrifying. I'm afraid she's going to snatch that cage out of Frieren's hands. I'm like, Frieren, can you handcuff that cage to your hand so that she can't snatch it away next episode? I'm a little bit worried about that. I'm just saying. She's like, it's too late to run. So meanwhile, we go back and we have Scarf, or I want to call him Snarf. I want to call him Snarf from He-Man, but Sharf. He has this really bitchin' ability to take flowers and flower petals, like the flora and fauna, and convert it into needles and like metal. He can take like, I guess the flora and fauna from the earth and create it into man-made metals. That's so freaking cool. I love that. I love that so much. I was like, oh, look at the blue flowers like Himmel. And then they became nails. And he shoots them over to Land and cuts the cheek. And he's like, now I'm curious what Land can do. We don't see Land's ability yet. So I don't know. Usually when a character reveals their ability first, that usually means they're going to lose. So I'm curious to know what Land has up his sleeve. He may not win, but we'll see. Then Air has this like Doragate, which is like a big cannon and firing different rocks like a cannon. And Fern's just like basically just deflecting them and firing the Zoltrak. Again, I love she says her technique is refined and shows no openings, but it's old, like fighting my grandfather. I like the idea of grandparents being mages. And she's like, you use basic spells. And Fern's like, I was taught to only use basic spells in combat. That's enough to defeat the mages of this era. That is such for Frieren to be like, all you need to know is the basics. You can defeat all these mages, these young whippersnappers that think they know everything. That's such like a bitch thing for Frieren to say, to tell her. And the moment she says that, like you see like Ares, like her eyes kind of twitch like, oh really? Is that so, huh? And then she fires at her again. Now what's interesting is that she's like, what is this feeling of wrongness? I mean, Fern clearly has something up her sleeve, but we don't know what yet. She's like, it feels like I'm fighting an experienced mage. And then she says, now, if Werble had been your opponent, you'd be dead by now because of his technique. Like, it just so happens we have to match up. But Fern's like, aren't you the strongest one here? Not him? I like that. I like that Fern can kind of detect that she's stronger than Werble. But here's the thing. Werble is the better leader. So Air kind of just lets him think that he's the strongest. And that's a good sign of like, that's a sign of a strong opponent in Air because she knows how valuable Werble is when he's the leader. So she kind of makes the executive decision, it seems, to take the second place route, let him excel and get the spotlight, and she can just, you know, be able to excel behind the scenes. That's clever. That's neat because she knows what he needs to feel most competent. And maybe that's it. And maybe she doesn't realize that she's stronger than him. Maybe she doesn't believe it. Maybe she doesn't have the self-esteem to believe that. I don't know. We'll see that. But she describes Werble in all of his fringed and fur glory against Ubel. Like, both these two, I want these two to, like, just, pardon my language, I want them just to hate fuck each other. Is that wrong? Is that wrong? Pardon my language. Excuse my French. But I just want I feel like they both need to have, like, a hate lovemaking session. Is that called lovemaking if it's hateful? I don't think so. They feel like they both just need to, like, get it out of their system and then they'll be fine. That's all I feel like with them. I wanted to, like, almost ship Ubel and Werble because they're both such bitches. I want to ship them for that reason alone, right? But I also kind of like Ubel and Fern for just crack ship reasons. And then Air's like, well, Werble's the captain of the Northern Magic Corps that fought against the remnants of the Demon King forces. But again, remnants, not the Demon King's forces, the remnants of it. So I feel like Fern's like, so just because he said that doesn't mean he's the strongest. He has more experience in battle. But experience doesn't mean everything, right? And she's like, his magic is devoid of character. It's underhanded for the sole purpose of winning. So basically, he's the Hanamiya from Krokus Basketball of Frieren. The girl fighting Werble now will probably be killed. I'm like, I don't know. Ubel seems like she can hold her own. And Fern's just like, okay, is that so? I like that Fern is like, and then it just cuts to the end. It just hard cuts. Like, that's all. That's it. That's all we get. I'm like, that is kind of hilarious that Fern's like, okay. I love that we seem like Air and Werble's group are very verbose and they're just, like, talkative. Meanwhile, Fern and Ubel and Land are like, and? So I'm really excited to see what we get in the next episode, because it seems like next episode is going to be battles between the groups, which is really exciting. I don't know if we're going to focus just on Frieren's group versus Dinkin's group, or I think we're going to focus more on Fern and Werble and Ubel and the others and focus on them, but maybe we'll swap back and forth. I don't know. Now, somebody was commenting, asking about my thoughts on the ED and what the symbolism is. I think that we see Frieren at Himmel's grave looking at this. And because in the line she says, yeah, I hear you. I care about you. The wind teases this hair that's longer now, like her hair's grown out. And then she sits by the grave. But then it says there's meaning in everything. And we see a little Fern. And we see her kind of follow through and like follow around. And it looks like as Frieren gets the ribbon past her that's Fern's, she has the droplet of the red earring become the little hairbreadth that she gives Fern that has the butterfly. To me, what it represents is Frieren losing Himmel, but then as she goes along, she gains like that caring for someone back in the form of Fern, like her foster daughter. So I don't know, because it seems like when she reaches for the blue flower, and that to me reminds me when they go back to episode 2, when they found the blue flowers at the top of the tower, and she made the blue flowers, they exploded, and they were like her reminiscing about Himmel, but now she's tying it to Fern. That's how I feel like that is. I feel like that's tying her to her daughter, and Fern is like her daughter. So yeah, that's my theories. So man, there's a lot set up here. I'm curious to see how these battles go next episode. Very curious, but I'm also very curious to know what your thoughts down below are. So I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Bye!